Thank you so much, Beth, for joining us. We're joined by Beth Botham, who started Rejuvenate Kits. Yeah, thank you for chatting with us.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be on.
Yeah, no, it's great. You're in like our first round of people that we've been chatting to and interviewing, so it's a real pleasure.
And I'm quiet and fangirling in the corner because this is just amazing.
You make me blush.
So first of all, how has lockdown been for you? How has it been for your everyday routine?
Yeah, it's been okay. I think everyone has had to adjust in some way or compromise in some way. But for me, my work and my business is structured a little differently. So a lot of what I do anyway is online. So actually, the movement of office to working from home hasn't applied for me. I've always worked from home, always kind of been doing my own thing, like running my own businesses. So in terms of change, hasn't really been a lot of change. If anything, actually, it's been a period of growth for me. So my YouTube channel has grown really since like February, March time, which is funny because it's almost like as a lot of people are struggling or pulling back or not knowing what to do with their time, I'm going harder. So it's like a weird contrast, but it's been okay. It's been good. As I said, I've been working from home, doing YouTube, doing Rejuvenate, and just learning as I go in these weird times.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, definitely.
So I suppose the thing that you're probably most known for is your experience with cancer, which then sort of triggered you starting your own business. All while you were kind of about to leave school. I mean, you were diagnosed as you were studying for your A-levels, weren't you? So I suppose I'm really interested to know, when you look back on that whole time in your life, I suppose like post-diagnosis and then while you're in treatment and like finishing treatment, what do you remember the most about? Like, what's your overriding memory of it?
I have to say, now I'm fine talking about it, as you can probably tell, but that's because I'm 5 years down the line. At the time, it was a very harsh thing to go through at 17.
Yeah.
I asked a lot of why me, is quite like on the border of a toxic mindset, but it was quite natural to feel that way because it went from a mundane day at school, you know, I might do a club after school, go out with friends, that's all you really did at 16, 17, to then thinking about potential mortality, as depressing as that sounds, as well as trying to sustain this life of studying and exams. So at the time, it was very eventful, very like overwhelming, tiresome. But now, because I made a point to address it, so to discuss it and don't deny it, it's only a positive for me in this day and age, really, because since then I've, as I said, addressed it, obviously built a brand from it, like Rejuvenate Kits, which hopefully gives something back to those struggling with cancer. But I definitely would say it was a time that shaped me. I think I was almost catapulted from the norm and was different then. So it's helped me now to be different in terms of the way I lead my life. So that's the start of so much.
I mean, that's like amazing that you were able to like turn that into so many positives. And I definitely want to get back to that thing of like being taken out of your like peer group, I guess, and like comparing yourself to those people. We'll get onto that later. So when launching Rejuvenate Kits then, what was it like, sort of from the moment that you were like, this is something that I think should be like, that I think loads of people would benefit from? I mean, first of all, we just love that you were able to turn such a difficult like experience into you helping other people through that, and you like turning it back and being like, so many other people are going to need what I needed. So I'm going to do this thing.
One thing that I particularly love about it and really admire about it, which I don't know if everyone would recognize it, is I saw an interview where you said a line, "My loved ones didn't know what to buy me."
Yeah.
And I just resonated with that so much, because when people are going through a difficult time and you can have so much empathy and sympathize with it, and you can feel it on an emotional level, for some reason you go to flowers, or or you go to when you go to a hospital gift shop, there's soft teddies and lollipops and magazines.
Exactly.
Actually, that really got me thinking. So I went, I would not know what to buy someone. And straight away now I have that link that it's not a self-care kit to a certain extent. It's actually deeper than that. And it's personalized by you and your journey. And I think that's so powerful, Beth. And I thank you for bringing that to people, because it makes it easier for the people going on that journey with someone who's sick to deal with it themselves without feeling insensitive.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I really appreciate that. Thank you. It's true. Like, it goes way deeper. That's why it's almost difficult to explain what Rejuvenate Kits is about, because on the surface it's a gift you give someone, but you give it to them because you don't know what to say, because you might have never gone through it, you don't know how you can help. And I felt a weird mix of emotions when I received flowers and chocolates and teddy bears and sweets, because I felt like, oh God, people are really feeling sorry for me. Like, this feels like a sympathy vote. And getting loads of flowers, I felt like it was my funeral, as depressing as that is. And none of it actually helps, yet people were just giving. And that for me just represented the the lack of power, if I can get my words out, the lack of power. And in that time, all my family and friends wanted is to feel like they could help. And that's a common feeling.
Incredible.
In terms of like your practical approach then, so after like sort of having the idea and the concept for it, I guess, what were your first steps in realizing it?
So I knew it would be something that worked in terms of supply and demand, just because I was the consumer. I'd gone through it and I wanted it myself. So it was quite good in the sense that I didn't have to imagine a target market, or I didn't have to think like, does this actually have a demand out there? Because I knew it did. And that's what started the process of Rejuvenate Kits. And then from then on, I thought about, before I even looked at sourcing and kind of actual tangible things, I looked at brand name, what I wanted it to feel like, what I wanted it to look like, whether that's color tones to aesthetics of packaging. So that's where I kind of started, and I did that in my notebook when I was at uni, like a little side hustle. And I thought, like, I will pick up on this. I just need to get this down right now.
I love it.
And kind of, put the foundations in place before I start thinking about the actual product and holding it in my hand. And that's where I really think, as someone that's been in business, people should start with. I think people get lost in it and think about ordering stock and units and pricing, but you've actually got to think about like the fundamentals of the brand, because a lot of times a product isn't unique, but what makes it unique is the brand name or the feel of it or its USP. So, yeah.
We did a similar journey with FREEBIRD, didn't we, Kirsten? We did everything, the idea, the value, how we looked. We did all of that behind when we even started programming or scheduling interviews, because how can we pitch ourselves to our platform members or our collaborators if we don't know who we are or what our USP is? So that was, we spent weeks on that before, and the platform members are still waiting for us, because we don't launch until we know that we believe in this and the collaborators believe in it. And now we're at a point where we're like, right, we're ready to go now. We know what we are and what our next steps are.
Yeah, otherwise you get diluted down the line, you sway, because you don't have your concrete post in place saying who you are, and what you don't compromise on.
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah. And so you launched, or you sort of started doing YouTube around the same time, is that right? Or maybe while you were still at uni, but before, or while you were starting to sell the kits?
Yeah, so my YouTube started in December 2018. So yeah, it was around a similar time that I started it, and it kind of tied in quite nicely, because I started my YouTube by documenting business journeys and tips and things, from like how to start a business or should you list on Shopify or Amazon, or sourcing tips. And it meant that as I was going through it, I was learning so much week on week. So I naturally just thought, like, I want to put this somewhere for my own pleasure, almost like an archive, but also it feels a waste for me to go through it and keep it in my mind. So it naturally fed onto my YouTube channel.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And like such a good resource for people who are at the point that you were at 2 years ago, I guess, of being like, how do I even do all this?
Thank you.
I suppose I'm curious to know, like, who your audience is, and like whether you have like an ideal audience when you make those videos, or whether you're just like, this experience is like helpful for people, so I'm just gonna like, do you think about audience when you're making them?
Yeah, I do think about audience, but I think my audience has shifted. So at the start it was mainly UK based entrepreneurs, or even people in jobs looking and being intrigued about starting something for themselves. And now I kind of share a combination between business and lifestyle, because when I was doing just business videos, people want to see more of me, like, who is this person behind like the top 5 tips and things. And then also when I do lifestyle things, the reality is, like, I don't spend every day on a beach or whatever. Like, I also do work, so I do want to share business stuff. So I think it has shifted slightly, but now my YouTube channel is more authentically me. And I think that's more sustainable for anyone wanting to start a business or a YouTube channel. If you just stick to yourself, cover things that you actually experience in everyday life, you'll be more authentic, which is what people want, and it's more sustainable for you to keep up.
It's a level of realness, isn't it? When we watched so many of your videos, so I can't remember exactly which one it was, but you were talking about your aims of the video and the aims of your day, and then you did like a time lapse of you putting your makeup on, and I was just like, yes, like we don't wake up like, you know, beautiful and glowing and business ready. There is a process in the morning that we make time for.
Yeah.
It's a small thing, but it's so real, and you're absolutely right about how authentic it feels. It really does, you know.
Thank you.
I love those tiny details.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's good, because sometimes I just feel like I'm talking to myself, because I'm obviously talking to a camera. Yeah. I'm like, yes, me and my friends. Just me. So it's nice actually hearing the other end, because
we are out here.
Like I've never, exactly. I just find it crazy that like you can be in your bedroom talking to a camera, and then, but you know, the people on the other side of that, there's like thousands and thousands of, you know, like you can't quite hold it in your head like, oh, I'm potentially talking to like 80,000 people.
But the views, although like I'm still like, whoa, that's a lot of views, it still doesn't feel like people. It was only when I went to Sainsbury's like 2 weeks ago, and I was just doing my food shop, and someone tapped me on the shoulder and was like, I'm a subscriber, and I was like,
oh my god.
Like, this is crazy now. But it's great, like it fills me with joy. So it's such a nice feeling.
That's really good. I also wanted to talk, I mean, we really need to like dig into this entrepreneurship thing, because so there was this study in 2018 done by NatWest, which revealed that under 5% of the women's UK, the UK's female workforce have started their own business. And obviously that was 2 years ago. So I would imagine things have changed since then, and hopefully there's been growth. Especially over lockdown, considering the number of people that are starting side hustles. And also over the course of the 2010s, that number had increased by 45% in women, which was higher than it was for men, which is amazing. So as one of the top 32 female entrepreneurs in the UK to look out for, how do you feel about those sort of statistics? How do you think we encourage more young women to go into business and not see it as this masculine profession?
Well, firstly, it is crazy. I thought the percentage would be higher than that, honestly speaking. Secondly, I think it's a difficult thing, because I didn't grow up around any entrepreneurs, male or female. So part of me does think it is something that comes from within. Some people have an entrepreneurial flair or just an interest, like a curiosity to do something different. And sometimes you just need to focus on that and grow that and give it the attention it needs. Some don't, and that's fine, because at the end of the day, you have to get up every day. So it needs to be something you enjoy. But for those that do like it, I think what we can do to encourage its nourishment really is to help each other out. Like it's seen as really intimidating because there's so much jargon. Like even now I come across jargon every day. Like if I'm looking into contracts for business or taxes or anything like that, I'm thinking, what the hell? But then I somehow overcome it and then move on to the next thing. But what I don't realize is that Beth maybe 2 years ago would still be at stage 1, and now I'm nowhere near the end, but there is knowledge and jargon and lessons I've overcome that I've just almost like got in my backpack. And I think the more that we can break those down, share them, whether that is on YouTube or on a YouTube video, or even just on Instagram, like I'm trying now to be more authentically me on my Instagram and share pictures of me, pictures of my life and business. And by doing that, it's showing that I am a multifaceted person and you can be too. You don't have to be like 50 in a suit to be in business. You can also take a selfie, but also have a business, you know? So it's quite nice to break down the barriers. And I think that's the effort that we should try to do.
I remember being in school, and my top 2 subjects in school, not out of grades, but actually out of interest, were business and art. And I remember being in school and we were talking about entrepreneurship, commerce, economics, accounting, and what the different strands were within business. And all of them were formulaic and, you know, software systems and blah, blah. And the first thing under entrepreneurship was taking risks. And it basically, not the textbook, but basically in the classroom throughout that education, it was kind of like, just this focus on male entrepreneurs without actually saying it. You know, you'd have names like Richard Branson or Michael O'Leary, or, well, obviously being in school, there was a lot of Irish CEOs, they were all male. And I remember just kind of getting to this point in my life where I was starting to figure out about female entrepreneurship, which I don't know why we have to say female, because they're all just entrepreneurs. But point being, I think I grew up for a very long time thinking that men were the risk takers and women weren't. Not that women had a role, but it just seemed to be this kind of, oh well, men must be better risk takers than women, and that's why they're all entrepreneurs. And same, I didn't grow up in a house that had entrepreneurs, but it got to a point in my life where I had friends who had dads who were entrepreneurs. And I remember I had this one friend who, her mum was also an entrepreneur. She ran her own interior design company, and she was just fierce. And that was the first female entrepreneur I'd ever met, and I was nearly 18. You know, and I remember thinking, oh wow, okay, so did you take any risks? And she was like, what do you mean? You know, I started something and I wasn't selling anything, I was a service. I wasn't really risking anything until someone decided to employ my services. And I was like, what is this whole thing about risk taking? You know, actually it is to a certain extent depending on what you do, but it's not actually as scary. So I also think there's this thing about being afraid to be an entrepreneur because you've got so much to lose.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, in terms of the risks, it's having to compromise sometimes. So with entrepreneurship, it works differently to a job where you get paid hourly, because it is what you get out is what you put in. And in the early stages especially, you might be working so hard to get your business off the ground, but you might not be seeing a return yet. And I think that's a risk that is becoming more known, but it's less of a like big financial risk, but more of a compromise of your time, or compromise on what you get in the short term. But to me, that's quite exciting, because I like working at something knowing that in the future it can pay off. So I think there's that impatience. I think people should be aware of, you can start up a small business or like a side hustle, whatever the term is, but it might not pay off until next year or the year after. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely.
And I suppose the other thing, I mean, I was this morning actually, I was just reading an article about like the legacy of Sheryl Sandberg, and how we look back on Lean In differently now that we're like, I think it was released like 5 years ago or something, maybe more. And it means such a different thing to take risks like that, even long-term risks that like are sort of within your control. If you're also thinking like, well, I want to have a baby in the next like decade, you know, like, I guess that's another thing that when you talk about compromise, that makes me think like, no matter where you're coming from, starting something like that, you do have to make a lot of compromises. But when you're in a position where society, or whether you're just wanting like a family, and that often means more responsibility for women than it does for men, that compromise is like on a different level for us.
Yeah, I also find it's just a shift in life. Like when I started to think more business minded, I just saw a natural shift between maybe the people I spent time with, when I could spend time with them. For instance, a lot of people or friends or just people my age, like an 18-year-old, would say at Friday 5 p.m, oh, do you want to go out? But that's not actually the way it works when you've got a business. And I found that when I started to shift my entire life, I live differently. And also like just in terms of mental connection, you start to want different things from your company. So actually it's a shift in terms of life, which for me has been really beneficial, but something to definitely think about.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
No, it's really like, it really makes me like, reading statistics like that really makes me wonder like, what are we doing wrong in this country, especially considering like on a global scale where like I think the UK are still pretty far behind in terms of the participation of women in business. And even like, you know, you watch shows like The Apprentice and it's still like Alan Sugar up there, like there's I guess that's representation as well. And Emma and I deal a lot with that in the shows that we work on, like
male creative teams.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, you know, male leads in a show compared to pay is a big thing in the arts as well. But my God, we need a strong drink to get into that, don't you think?
Yeah, the gender pay gap is like a whole other
and it definitely goes through business as well. Like as a business person, you can also be an investor, and it's, although on Dragon's Den you do have like female and male investors, for example, but still it's you feel sometimes on the back foot, you know, if you're going into a corporate meeting with all male shareholders and you're the only female, especially if it's someone like me that's a young female who they look at me and think, how much business knowledge do you actually have?
I went to a meeting once. The work that I used to do involved a lot of travel, without saying any names or revealing anything. I went to a meeting once in France, and I had been the main correspondent for quite a long time for this project. And when I walked into the room, there were 2 other women, and when I walked into the room, went up to the lead male and basically said, oh hi, I'm Emma, you know, finally we meet. And he went, oh, and it was like,
oh,
what's the problem? Like, but obviously it was like, first of all, I have to deal with the fact I'm a girl, which, you know, okay, I get it, I'm a girl in business and I hold my own, but now I have to deal with age. Like, for real? Like, can we just side part that I've done really well in my 20s? Like, does that really have to be an issue? But I always see that, and it just, whenever I'm doing anything, I'm like, oh, just block that out. Don't let that be a weakness, that moment of weird handshake. Don't let that go. Like, that was on him. It's so not on me or any other girl that's in their early 20s trying to, you know, fulfill their career. It's just, that's his issue. So not.
Because you can look at that from the perspective of like, how amazing, right? That he, whatever bias that he had towards the body that you currently live in, you were able to surpass that just by the emails that you, like the work that you've been doing for him without having met him. Like, you can look at it in that way, but I can imagine, it's like also like stick to beat yourself with like, oh, well, I guess his assumptions are all like correct. That's crazy.
It's a hard one because I feel like as a woman in business, I want to keep my femininity and my sensitivity, but you have to be assertive and almost like bullish as well. You have to like stick up for yourself and know you're not to be messed with. So that's definitely like an identity thing where you have to work out what the right balance is.
Definitely. I nearly have an alter voice when I'm in certain meetings. Like, it's very strange, and it's not that I'm doing it, it's a subconscious thing. You're absolutely right. You have this, I need to come across strong but not rude, and you know, and it's very strange, or you know, opinionated without being sarcastic or patronizing.
Exactly.
And I think that's a big thing on social media right now. You see a lot of those posts that, you know, say don't be afraid to be opinionated, strong, and I know it's on a lot of other people's minds, but when you have that first-hand experience of it and you can connect with other people who have had it as well and actually have a decent conversation, it's just, I don't know, it's refreshing. I think it's just it's like having allies, even though there isn't, you know, a major conflict. It is like having allies in mindset.
I wanted to come back to that thing of having a peer group, especially in education, a group of people that you're sort of going on this journey with, where the standards for success are all quite obvious and clear, and you can say like, okay, well, you know, we all scored differently on this particular exam, or like, you know, this person is doing this thing on this module or whatever. Going from that into an environment where the markers for success are a lot more blurry, and rather than it being a ladder, like the world of work is just sort of becomes like this like jungle gym where everyone's off doing different things. And I suppose, do you think that, I mean, what you mentioned earlier about your experience with Hodgkin's, how that sort of allowed you to step back a bit and not and say like, okay, this is very different to what everyone else is doing at the moment. How did you manage that, like immediately after university? How do you still like manage not to get caught up in what everyone else is doing?
In terms of like immediate peers, or just comparison far and wide on social media?
I think maybe either. I mean, it's interesting talking about immediate peers, because you can grow up with a group of, you know, you have different like levels of friendship groups, don't you? Like, and your relationship to like maybe the kids that you grew up around can be really different to the people that you go to uni with, or like, you know, the people that you follow on social media. I think your immediate peer group is maybe more interesting.
I think it's a tough one. As you said, when you're a kid, or even GCSEs, A-levels, everyone is just at the same point. Everyone's kind of achieving the same. You're all living in the same town. You all go to the same school or uni. And going on a different route, I feel like in my personal experience, and I can only talk about myself, has exposed me more. So it's like, from your year group at school or from your peers, there's a few that almost like pop out. So if it's a straight line, there's a few that like go up or whatever that you hear of. And I've no way done what I want to achieve or anything like that, but just starting to do that means that I've had the spotlight on me a bit more. So I've had peers that I haven't spoken to for years pop up and be like, wow, Beth, you're doing something so different. Like, it's different to everyone else's 9 to 5, but I see what you're doing. I appreciate it. Keep doing it. And that's lovely. But as I said, exposure also brings criticism. So there's also been people that have a problem with it because I'm not the same anymore. And I think it'd be so much simpler to be the same. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if that's people naturally, I'm sure we're all guilty of it at times, but people naturally could see someone doing something and feel a bit of bitterness, like, you were the same as me one time and why are you doing this and why not me? It can reflect on the person, but obviously I'm not perfect. They might have a problem with what I'm doing, but generally I would say doing something different exposes you. And that is the fear that a lot of people have. Like, I can't create a YouTube channel because my friends will see it, or I can't start a business because what will people say? And that is definitely something. As I'm 22, so as someone that's young, you're still kind of connected to uni and school, whereas if you're like 32 or 42, I feel like it's quite distant now. But exposure is definitely a thing I have experienced.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I've also found with, not the word success, I don't know, with growth, I'm going to say with growth, quite soon after school, if you are doing well, sometimes I've felt quite stifled with situations to put them on social media or to advertise them. Like when I first start getting really good jobs, I was like, oh, I'm just not going to tell anyone. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you
Yeah.
can't, and I don't know why there's like a block to ownership of it. Or if you have a great holiday, you don't want to, you know, masquerade it on social media and see,
Mm.
you know, I don't know how
Yeah,
to,
the issue for me is that social media has become my business. So
yeah,
do I almost like injure myself because of what other people think? So with me, I get more views, more customers, blah, 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 by putting myself out there. And before business happened, I would never have done that. But the more I've let go and relaxed, the more growth I've seen.
yeah.
So for me, it's like, I kind of have to, and I want to as well, actually. But as you said, it's a difficult one because people still are checking up on you and have their thing to say, whether that's positive or negative. So
It's a pity. It is a
And
pity.
everyone has a totally, maybe not everyone, but lots of people have such a different approach to social media, even just to things like WhatsApp. Like, I have some friends who will be so cutthroat about WhatsApp and will be like, do not add me into anything I don't need to be in. And like, and I have that at work too, people being like really strict about what they do on their phones. And that extends to social media as well. And for definitely for our generation, I think we've become more self-conscious in our use of it, which is good, but it can also lead to like stuff that you were talking about, Emma, of being like, am I only posting this because I want to portray a certain image of myself? And maybe having that as your business is actually kind of better because you've already acknowledged that you're doing it for a specific purpose. Rather than posting something and then being like, was I only doing that because I wanted to project something to other people that's not actually true, you know?
Yeah, since we've started FREEBIRD, my Instagram is filled with other like feminist groups or women in business groups. Yeah. And I'm like, oh great, they've got 6,000 followers, you know, and I'm like, no, just stop for a second, okay? Because I believe in what we're doing and I don't need this, and I don't know why Instagram is doing that to me. You know, if FREEBIRD is a business account, why would I want to see all the other businesses? Why is Instagram doing that? But you know, I just had to take a second and go, we're really unique and we know what we believe what we're doing in. I don't need to see the competition. They're also people who are doing the same thing that we do. You know, they'll be our friends through this process. But
if their mission is true as well, they won't fight you and put you down, because if they are all about encouraging female empowerment, then so are you. So if anything, like a joining forces.
Same with your brand is doing an amazing deed, and if there was another out there, which I don't think there is, but if there was another out there, it's not this competition in business thing. It's not flight airline versus flight airline.
They're
two great companies selling an amazing product and having a great voice.
And helping like with the same goal. It's true.
Thank you.
And then so we're nearing the end of our time. But I wanted to chat a little bit more. You touched briefly on work-life balance and that thing of when, particularly in the early stages of something, having to put a lot of your own time into it and make compromises in order to get stuff out of it. Has that gotten easier? Have you found it easier to set boundaries for yourself and be like, I'm not going to answer emails at this time?
That is all.
Oh no.
Okay, work-life balance is definitely something I need to work on. However, as I'm seeing growth, I'm learning to systemize or to order things. So I don't know if you've seen, but regularly on my Instagram, I share like business tips or business quotes. And that's basically like wisdom that I'm learning about at the moment. And right now I'm kind of learning about living an effective life. So simple habits that I'm starting to implement now is not checking my emails first thing in the morning, and instead doing that task that is a bit hefty, that's not that nice, straight away, and then getting it done before lunch, before any procrastination or any like ifs, buts, whatever's come in. So that's helping me to streamline my life. But for me, it's a difficult one. I do need to take the time for me more, but I do work hard. I am a hard worker and I'm a focused worker. So I'm seeing things evolve and grow, and that actually genuinely excites me. So I am working hard, but not as a slave for someone else. I'm working hard and seeing results. So yeah, it's something I'm working on, but I do enjoy working hard for what I'm building for my personal brand and for Rejuvenate.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're working like smart. I feel like a few years ago there was that thing of like work hard but also like work smart, and don't spend hours doing something that you could do relatively quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It's about shifting mindset. Like, for example, when you were at school, or even if you're at a 9 to 5, say you have a task and they're the same, but in option A, you do that task in 15 minutes, and option B, you do that task in 3 hours and you get the same result. Traditionally, the 3-hour one, we feel better about. We feel like we've been productive. I've worked so hard on this. I've put a lot of work in. And we have to kind of shift that. Like, our pleasure and our feelings of accomplishment shouldn't be tied to time. So that's something I'm trying to detach a bit, just get the job done, move on, and be effective.
So good. Yeah, that's what we all need, definitely.
It's also really interesting that because of your work setup, you're used to working from home, because my main motivation is working in an office. So working from home has been such a vast change in mindset for me. And in terms of productivity levels and feeling like you've achieved something, I know that I'm working and I know that I'm getting everything done on my to-do list, but for some reason in this environment, we were just talking about this morning, Kirsten and I, there's something about this environment which still doesn't make you feel like you've ticked every single box.
Yeah, I think it's linked to environment. Like, I've never worked in an office on my business, but when I've done like internships and work experience and things, there is just like a satisfaction you get from the office environment when you've done it. You walk into your desk, you talk to people, you're suited and booted, you have to wear an attire, and you walk out of the office at the end of the day. It does feel like you leave it, you close it, I successfully did it. And then when you're at home, you have to be like, okay, this is my workspace. Today I did this. Even though like I'm walking 2 meters away to my kitchen, I still did something today. So
I stopped to have lunch yesterday, and I was like, right, it's 2:30. I've missed my 1 o'clock lunch, which I'd scheduled in my head to take, didn't take. And I went, right, I'm going to have lunch. And I had I couldn't decide what I wanted to eat. And then I was like, oh, I'll put a wash on. And then I was like, that's not having a lunch break. Like, it's not detaching for just not even an hour, just for 30 minutes and just a personal moment. And then I was like, no, I had to force myself to actually just sit, eat food, make a cup of tea, and just have 10 minutes,
That's the hard thing. That's the only thing that I have struggled with in the past, and that I would recommend for people is, although working from home is good, it's also easy to work in the evening or just to keep working. But sometimes you have to say, right, I will sit at my desk in my office, so separate from my sleeping and eating space, and at 6 p.m. sharp, leave it, shut the door, and go in a different room. Otherwise it blends. And I've never been able to do work like on my bed or on my sofa or anything like that. I just, for me, I wouldn't recommend it.
And it's about knowing yourself as well. Like, I now know that I really, and I guess I knew this at uni as well, but I am just like a night owl. Like, I will work so much better in the afternoons and evenings, and not so, I mean, depending on obviously the job that you're doing or the other people that you're working with and how interactive it is. It's not like, I feel like people shouldn't punish themselves for needing something different. And just like knowing what habits are most productive to them, and knowing like, okay, if I go out for a walk or a bike ride every morning, that's going to set me up better for the rest of the day, rather than like starting at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly. And like another thing that we spoke about briefly before about the growth and what people have to say about it, people don't also see the work that goes on behind it. So it almost like makes me like laugh inside or roll my eyes if people have something bad to say, because you don't understand the work or the challenges that go on. Like some of the challenges I've faced over the past 2 years running like 2 businesses on my own have been way beyond anything school taught me, anything uni taught me, and I felt like a small fish in a big pond. And that's what you don't show on social media necessarily. Not that I choose not to, but it's just not that interesting. Like I'm not gonna upload like contracts on Instagram. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on, you know. That's why I now give credit to other business owners or other people on social media, because there's a lot of hard work that's just almost like the stage and you don't see the rehearsals.
Yes,
totally. Yeah. Wow. Perfect metaphor.
Whoa.
I like a metaphor.
You really smashed it out of the park.
Amazing.
That was so good. Lastly, we've still got a couple of minutes. I wanted to talk about role models. I was watching one of your videos where you were talking about some of your role models.
Yeah.
You mentioned Deliciously Ella, who we also love, Patricia Bright, Grace Beverly, Stephen Bartlett. I was wondering, do you have any other people maybe who you've discovered recently who are inspiring you? Any like additions to that list?
Yeah, so firstly, the reason why those people are on that list is usually because they've done something different at a young age. So to put it simply, they've gone against the grain, which is kind of what I'm doing. A lot of them are a few steps ahead of me. So it paves the way of what I would like to accomplish, and it shows me that it is possible despite being a young female or despite coming from this certain background. But I have to emphasize that a lot of those are successful in business, but to me, that's only one slice of the pie. So I would like to be a good business person, but I'd also like to be a good friend, or I'd like to have a good soul, or I'd like to have great relationships and close to my family and things like that. So I learn about these kinds of people to an extent, but I don't like to completely idolize anyone, because I do feel that even if you're the most successful entrepreneur, you might meet someone that looks like they don't have anything in terms of items, but they have a lot to teach you about your soul and who you are as a person. So I look to those people, and I also listen to the podcast How I Built This with Guy Raz, which is a entrepreneurial podcast which talks about startup businesses and how they evolved. But also I like listening to podcasts that are about like being a better human, like just being kind, like not losing yourself. So I listen to Hamza Yusuf, who is a Muslim scholar, and he is so wise, and just, I don't know, like you might have a rough day where you have to be a bit savage in meetings and stuff, but then at the end of the day, I don't want to lose like my heart amongst it all, otherwise what's it worth? So Hamza Yusuf is a great one. And Omar Suleiman is another one. I listen to him on Apple Podcasts, so it's really accessible, and I'd really recommend that, because even if you're spiritual, not spiritual, religious, not religious, at the end of the day, we all want to be a good person. So don't get intimidated by titles you don't understand, or if they're Muslim, if they're Christian, or whatever. So yeah, that's what I do, just to get a real hold of myself.
We will link them somewhere associated to this.
Definitely.
And that feeds back into the way that you conduct yourself at work as well. I find like listening to stuff like that definitely helps you be a better like businesswoman, like and see yourself in those environments in a more well-rounded way, rather than just like, this is the only thing that I do and I do it like 100% of the time.
Because you can get lost in it. Like, what's your purpose if all of this is gone tomorrow? And also, even if all of it times by 10, like say your revenue is 10 million a year, if that's your only focus, you're just going to keep wanting more. I want 100 million. I want more. And that for me is a slippery slope, because that's a sign of like a greedy heart, and that's not who I want to be as a person. So I don't want to let business or ventures lead me down a path which is not great. I still want to be me at the end of it.
I also think that's really relevant to what's happening now with lockdown. It's interesting how many people were not prepared to step away from their careers, which, as someone who loves her career, I understand that, and I was devastated. And I went through like this grief wave where I was so angry. Like, this was supposed to be my year. This was supposed to be this. We were going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, hold on a second. Let's just weigh up exactly what's going on right now and what this year could be. But I think once you start to readjust, and exactly what you've just said, Beth, I'm reiterating it, once you start to focus on your internal systems and who you are as a person and the purpose of your life, not your job or your professional attributes, you could step away from your career and what you do at any moment and be okay.
Yeah.
Something that post lockdown I'm going to continue to work on. And obviously finances is a huge part of that. You know, we can sit here and this kind of sounds quite privileged. You know, obviously you need a savings account to be okay, and you need financial backing to be okay. But set that aside for a moment and actually go, okay, if everything went again, what have I got?
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that I'm going to bring forward after 2020, after the pandemic. That's going to be within not spirituality, but kind of a spiritual guidance in how I conduct my life now, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's just like an inner peace. Like, I just feel like you need it just to have like a strong core. Like, as we work out to make sure our physical health is intact, we also need to think about like, who am I? What am I doing here? Why? What am I about? And focus on your mental well-being as well. Otherwise, you lose one or the other.
Absolutely. Your mental well-being as well. Absolutely.
Thank you so much again. So your brand of I suppose like well-being kits, personal care kits, particularly for cancer sufferers, is called Rejuvenate Kits. What's the Instagram handle for that?
How do we
buy? Just at Rejuvenate Kits and then rejuvenatekits.com.
Cool. Great. And then your YouTube channel is Beth B, is that right?
Yes, you can find me Beth B if you want to see and hear more of this.
For all things like the number of topics that you cover is honestly amazing. I was looking at one of your ones on like you answering questions about like Islamophobia, and I was like, yes, like need this content.
Yeah, that was just like a personal Q&A, but yeah, I cover everything from like lifestyle, what I'm up to business and things. So yeah.
So good. Cool. Well, thank you again for chatting with us, Beth.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Major FREEBIRD goal ticked.